Good afternoon and welcome back to the M.a.N podcast. My name is Thomas and I am the host, or I don't know, whatever you want to call me. Today I have a very special guest on, Tommy Kelly. And Tommy, I didn't realise how much of a celebrity you are. How many times you've been on TV, how many times you've been in the paper. But yeah, Tommy has had one hell of a life. It's like he's lived 3 lifetimes in this one. I'm really excited to get to know him a bit better. We've spoke back and forth in DMs a few times. His Instagram and social media presence is phenomenal. And we spoke at the start if there's anything he doesn't want to talk about, but and I agree, he is a very open book. And I'm looking forward to hearing about some things and learning a lot about different things. So Tommy, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself, we'll just get this going.
Yeah, well, obviously my name's Tommy Kelly. I originally had an eating disorder that lasted over about 20 years, but to kind of put you into the picture about taking you back to when my childhood was really, really good. I had absolutely great parents who gave me everything. They gave me so much love. But my mum had suffered long-term cancers that originated from my birth. It started in cancer in the womb. I would never find out about that until she actually passed away. And what actually happened was I was a semi-professional footballer at one point, so I had trials for Scotland under-17s. I was playing with West Bromwich Albion. My grandfather was really, really ill at this point, around the age of 16. He was suffering from what was kind of late onset Parkinson's, so he had a kind of tremor in his hands and things. And he had type 1 diabetes, and what actually happened was he ended up suffering gangrene in his foot, which basically got that bad that the bone was actually crumbling out his foot. And he didn't want to go for an operation because he realised himself that he had a lot of heart problems and things like that. And the day before he actually passed away, I was suffering from a really bad kidney infection, so I was up at his house. And I remember he fell asleep in the sofa, and I got up and I said to him, "Look, Papa, are you okay?" And he was really, really shaking with the tremors in his hands and things. And I was kind of worried about him. And I said, "Look, I want to go and speak to my mum. I think you need to see a doctor and things." And he says, "Look, don't go and speak to your mum. Don't tell your uncles or anything like that. I don't want your mum worrying. She's going through cancer treatment." He says, "You've got to promise me that you don't say anything." I obviously didn't. And then I remember leaving his house. And every night before I left my grandfather's house, he would always say to me, I would turn around and I would say, "Look, I'll see you in the morning, Papa, I love you." And he would say the same back. This night I said that to him and he just gave me a kind of smile and things, and I thought there's something not right there. So the next day, me suffering with a kidney infection, silly enough, I went out and played football for my team. It was a local Ayrshire team. And I remember halfway through the game, I remember the police coming down to the pitch. Instinctively, I knew there was something wrong, and it was my grandfather had passed away. Basically, at that point, I started massively exercising. So it got to the point I was exercising roughly about 5 hours a day. And we went to register my grandfather's death. It was me, my uncle, and my mum in the back of the car. So I turned round to my mum and I said, "I'm going to start giving up things like sweets and pizzas and things I considered treats and that." My mum said, "Well, why would you want to do that? Your papa's really proud of you, you've been a footballer, he wants to see you do well and things." And I said, "I just don't see the point anymore." And at that point, you'd never heard my mum kind of say that the cancer and things was going to ever beat her. But it kind of took the fight out of her, I think, because the reason for her to keep going, obviously myself as well, but mostly to look after my grandfather. She'd done all his care and things like that. And my mum just gave up, and she went into the hospital to get a routine drain filled into her stomach because she was suffering with a lot of fluid basically build up in her stomach. This was just a routine thing. And I remember that day that there was something really, really off because my dog Sandy at the time, he always used to kind of stay around my mum. He used to get up and sleep in the room and look after her. He was at the window as she left with the cancer support, and he started really, really whining. It was as if he kind of knew that there was something not right there. And then we got a call later on that night from the hospital saying that my mum had taken a turn for the worst, that we were basically to come in and see her. So the whole family get invited in, and over the next whole week we spent the time in the hospital, basically just my mum in and out of consciousness and things like that. And crazy as it seems, my mum's main worry was that I was going to miss Christmas she kept saying, look, don't worry about this, you're going to get your Christmas and things like that. And this was November. And she was worried about my dad's birthday and things. And my mum had always said, look, I don't want to die in the house. I don't want Tommy to ever see me go, and I don't want him to see it in the hospital. And I had been in that room with all the rest of the family all that whole week. And I went into the wee visitor room and I fell asleep. And then I remember my aunt coming in and saying that Mum had passed away. I massively blamed myself because I didn't want to obviously miss losing my mum and saying goodbye to her, even though that was her wish at the time. And at that point, that's when things really, really escalated out of control. Started exercising like 15 hours a day. I was cutting down on my food to the point that I was living on like an orange and 2 litres of Pepsi Max a day. I was going back and forward to the doctor constantly, saying to him that I was suffering from like over-exercise and I just couldn't control living without my mum, and it was like grief and things. And the doctor just kept saying to me, look, here's antidepressants, take them. I've been through grief myself. I lost my dad. Come back and see me in 3 months. This went on for a whole 2 years. Right through from 1997 right through to 2000. And then at the year 2000, I decided I was going to go and visit my family over in Australia. That was my mum's side of the family. They had basically get taken away from my mum at a very, very early age, so they'd kind of disconnected and things, but they'd get back in touch and that. And to kind of put you in the picture, they 2 cousins over there at my mum's side, they both had eating disorders as well. So there's that obviously genetic link there as well, which people kind of don't understand. So over there I went basically against the doctor's orders to go and visit them. And I ended up going on a 6 months visa, and the 3 month part of the visa, my holiday got cut short because I was suffering from potassium loss due to basically vomiting and things like that. So at that point, I realised I had an eating disorder. It had taken that 3 years to kind of realise that. I began to hide it for people, making out it was Crohn's disease and things like that, and I was suffering from gut issues. So I ended up in the hospital over in Australia, and they ordered me to get back to Glasgow because I didn't obviously have medical care. So I was using my aunt's kind of medical care for that short period just to kind of get me balanced and be able to make the flight home. So in the flight home, I got back to Glasgow, and then a few months later, I would end up suffering a massive heart attack, which ended up resulting in a coma, which lasted 4 months, and that's when I was diagnosed as actually having an eating disorder. So, big story still after that. Ended up suffering, I was in the hospital for a whole year, getting refed through a peg tube into my stomach. I would end up getting back out into the community, but because of sciatic nerve damage below the left knee due to basically weight loss, which I've still suffered with for the day, so I've got no feeling below my left knee. So that was the reason why I ended up losing my footballing career. But I got back like working and things like that. I didn't have like that eating disorder voice like shouting at me 24/7. So it seemed like I was totally recovered for the eating disorder. Ended up getting back working. I was working in a warehouse. My life seemed really, really good, and I would end up meeting what would soon to become my wife. We would end up getting married in 2006. And then shortly after that, she suffered 4 miscarriages, which was actually misdiagnosed as polycystic ovarian syndrome. The 4th miscarriage she actually suffered in the house and ended up in a gangrenous tumour the size of a melon. She got rushed into the hospital and they done a procedure that was called at the time, crazy as it sounds, a Terry's chocolate orange procedure. So it was taken out in segments, basically because of the size of the tumour. And she needed a full hysterectomy, so obviously we couldn't have kids after that. I ended up suffering a second heart attack, and it was her that found me in the house with my eyes rolling in my head. I get taken into hospital, and for about the next year I spent in the hospital, which was really difficult because I was lucky at the time my dad was still alive to help her through the chemotherapy and things like that, which I felt terrible about, and I just couldn't control things. So the whole next year in the hospital, get back out into the community to be looked after by a great eating disorder community support team. But my dad was really, really ill all through his life with type 1 diabetes, and he would end up suffering a massive stroke which paralysed him all down his right side. Me and my wife were caring for him along with a close friend and another family member, 24/7 kind of thing. And he would end up at that point suffering the exact same thing as my grandfather. So he had suffered like gangrene in his left leg, so we're trying like maggot treatment and various things, and that didn't work, and then he ended up suffering a second stroke, which paralysed him again, and he was taken into the hospital, and it was basically just his heart was just pumping for like 4 weeks, and then he would end up passing away in 2014. And it was at that point something kind of clicked within me. I realised that I needed to get myself better, because my dad had always said, look, don't do it for me, don't do it for your wife, you've got to want to do it for yourself. And I felt terrible about that I was never able to do it for him and things, but it was almost like I had to lose like everything to get myself back. And I always say that about eating disorders, there's never one thing that can unlock the door, so to speak. For me, it was just that been sick and tired of being sick and tired, basically. And I decided I was wanting to get myself better. When I was in the hospital, I looked up various charities that were speaking about mental health, because in 2014 you never really heard about men speaking about mental health in general, especially eating disorders, because they were kind of looked at as basically a female illness. So it showed up things like See Me Scotland and the Beat Charity, and I contacted them, and I decided that I wanted to obviously speak about my eating disorder, because I was put into a psychiatric unit which didn't have an understanding of eating disorders at all. So they were in there basically taking notes off me how to best support people with eating disorders, because all they did was like sit outside your room 24/7, watching you, everything you ate, following you to the bathroom, various other things. So at that point I decided that I was going to do that. I got out of hospital and I started speaking at Scottish Parliament, which was the first time I ever actually spoke about my eating disorder, and that was at Eating Disorder Awareness Week in 2015. And then from there I went on to speak in like various newspaper interviews. I was on with Freddie Flintoff speaking about his eating disorder on BBC. It's kind of led me to where I am today. So I've been in recovery for 7 years, fully recovered for 5.
Unbelievable, man. Holy shit. So I knew you'd had a bit of a roller coaster, but I did not realise that that roller coaster had completely came off the tracks. So for anybody listening, I'm not an expert, and I don't even actually know too much about eating disorders, disordered eating. Tommy, you have obviously a whole heap of experience, and you do have some qualifications as well. However, we probably have to suggest that if you are someone struggling with any sort of disordered eating or eating disorders, please go speak to a professional. This is a conversation between Tommy and I. He may not have the solutions for you. We may talk about certain things that he has done in the past. That is not an option or a route that you should potentially take. Please do speak to a professional. But like Tommy, that is fucking... And you're from Glasgow, aren't you?
No, I'm actually originally from Dalry in Ayrshire, but I stay in Irvine in Ayrshire at the moment.
Right, okay. Where was your mum from?
Dalry in Ayrshire, yep.
Yeah. Mate, she is cut from hard woman, nails. Honestly, when you hear stories like that, it like genuinely gives me like goosebumps, like someone being like she'll have known where she was. She'll have known laying in that bed, but still thinking about everybody around them. I just think that's unbelievable.
Well, that was my mum's thing. Like, my mum's whole thing was about looking after other people. So even all through her own illness, she would look after people in the street, like old people. She would try and help people. That was how she got on with things, basically.
Super. Honestly, it gives me goosebumps thinking about that. So there's a couple things, Tommy, that I kind of want to learn a little bit about. With regards the eating disorders, is extreme exercise, was that like the start, and then like the almost like controlled starving, I guess it was, with you eating an orange and Pepsi Maxes? Can you kind of go into a bit of detail about, I don't know, maybe like where the thought behind that was that made sense, potentially like even just touch a little bit on eating disorders and disordered eating and the various types, if you could, please.
Yeah, well, in general, usually the exercise kind of comes later on down the line, and basically they call that migration theory effect. It's basically taking us back to what kind of hunter-gatherer days, where obviously if your body's in starvation, your body wants to migrate and look for food. With eating disorders, that's generally how it plays out. Your body wants to exercise more because it's your body's way of telling you it needs to have like food in its intake. But for me, that came really early on in the eating disorder. And I think basically for me, the reason for that was because I had grew up in a kind of, obviously being a footballer, and that was part of my thing. It was just how it seemed to play out for me. But eating disorders are basically a coping mechanism. Like I say, it's a way of dealing with things. It can be stress, it can be physical abuse, it can be grief, it can be bullying, anything like that. For me, obviously, it was grief, and that's how it played out. And it's a coping mechanism because you think you're dealing with things and you feel that it's like a safety blanket, but it's exactly the opposite of that. That's where people kind of don't understand about eating disorders. They think it's a way of like kind of looking for attention seeking and things. It's actually not about that. It's because somebody's trying to control things, and that's where the difficult part of like being sent into psychiatric wards, because they just focus on like body mass index. They're basically there to get you nutritionally rehabilitated and send you back out into the community. Never really dealing with the actual neural rewiring process and getting into that reason which actually caused you to have the eating disorder. That's where the real work's done, but obviously you need to get to that nutritional rehabilitated state to be able to do that.
Yeah. So see, when, like, what sort of help did you get in the psychiatric ward? Was it just like, we think you should eat? How did they deal with you? How did they help? How did they try and push you forward?
Well, what actually happened was I was actually originally supposed to go to the Priory in Glasgow, because that's really the only other kind of specialised unit, apart from I think Aberdeen, that actually deal with eating disorders. So they're the actual professionals. But because it can be like a postcode lottery, because what actually happens is when you meet all the criteria to go to the Priory, they come down, they see you, then it goes back to your GP surgery, who then have to go and get the funding. What actually happened with me is because my GP surgery couldn't actually meet the funding criteria, it fell through. So I was kept basically at the psychiatric unit, and like I say, they didn't have an understanding of eating disorders at all, even though they had like other females and things like that. But their basic way of coping with it and kind of helping you is somebody sitting beside your bed 24/7, watching you eating, following you to the bathroom, basically 24-hour surveillance. They didn't know anything about eating disorders, and that's why at that point they decided that they were going to do like an NHS pilot scheme with me, kind of understanding like eating disorders. So they were coming in taking notes 24/7 off me. There was never any therapy or anything like that. It was basically just get your weight up, get you to a state where we can think that you're out of a kind of death's door kind of thing, and then sent back out into the community.
That's nuts. Is therapy now like the key route for? Is it eating disorder patients, sufferers? I'm not sure what the.
Yeah, well, obviously, kind of cognitive behavioural therapy, dialectical behavioural therapy, things like that. That's the kind of route that most people go. Speaking to a psychologist, really, that's where you should go, really. But obviously, always, if you're suffering with eating disorder, your first port of call should be go and speak to your GP, then take it from there.
Yeah. So see, when like you mentioned there that you were having like the voices shouting in your head. What sorts of things were they saying? Like, what was it that they were telling you to do? Like, can you talk about that? And then like potentially you said like there was a point where it was like you were at rock bottom and you were like, nah. And then can you talk through like what was going through your mind pre the voices, and then what kind of came out the other side?
Well, pre the voices, it was basically I blamed myself for my mum's passing and things like that, and obviously blamed myself for my grandfather's passing. So it was basically, in a way, it was a kind of self-destruct mode. I wanted to punish myself, because to kind of put you in the picture, when you've got an eating disorder, most people look in the mirror and they see themselves as being overweight. My eating disorder was never ever like that. So that's why the psychiatrist actually said I was in quote unquote an enigma, because my eating disorder, though it was a full-blown eating disorder, it didn't represent itself in the way that most would, because I looked in the mirror and I seen myself as being really, really underweight, and I wanted to punish myself. I hated myself in the mirror. So that's where my eating disorder was. But the voice in itself, people kind of don't understand it, because they think when you talk about a voice, they think it relates to something like schizophrenia, which is an internal voice. But an external voice. The eating disorder is an internal voice, so it's your own voice kind of fighting against itself, because every movement that you do, every type of like morsel or food you want to eat, that voice is telling you that, oh, you're going to be stronger if you don't do that, you're going to be weak. So listen to that voice, continue the steps that you're doing a day, do more exercise, cut down on your food, you'll be going to be more than other people. So it's constantly belittling you. It controls basically your whole life. For me, it was all about trying to combat that, because the way I ended up doing it was learning to what was that actual voice and what was my voice. So the way I done it was that the voice that spoke to me first was always the eating disorder, because that was the one that was always belittling me. So I learned that was the eating disorder voice, and I began to kind of use that and say, look, challenge that. So if it would tell me don't eat, I would then try and kind of every 2 hours eat by the clock, because when you're suffering from an eating disorder, your stomach shrinks and things like that. You don't get these hunger cues, because leptin and ghrelin, all those hunger hormones are out of whack and things like that. So I basically ate by the clock and kind of controlled that and counted that, acted against that, and that was the way I basically got over that eating disorder voice. And it got to the point the voice get littler and littler. It basically became a whimper to the point it disappeared totally. But I always say, I think with an eating disorder, there's always going to be something in your life that may trigger it. So for me, it's understanding my triggers, and for me, that is obviously grief. So celebrating my mum and dad's life, going down and put flowers down and things like that, learning my triggers and basically putting things into place. That's what you've really got to do, because I always say you're going to leave that little gap in the door, and if you can leave that gap in the door, the eating disorder will kick it in. So it's about understanding what your triggers are, putting things in place to deal with that.
Mate, unbelievable. So you mentioned as well, like 2 heart attacks. Was the first heart attack due to just the body just kind of shutting down?
Basically because potassium, magnesium and phosphate loss, so all the kind of minerals that regulate your heartbeat and things and all your central nervous system. The potassium mainly because that controls your heartbeat. So when you're making yourself vomit, you deplete potassium. So that in itself is actually what caused the eating disorder. And I'm not going to give like numbers, like, because I think that doesn't mean anything. But I was at a really, really low body weight, and obviously that plays a part as well. But it's not the main reason. But it was the potassium, really.
So, like Tommy, I know where you're at now, and we've had a few conversations. But there's a few things that I'm just again, it's curiosity from my side, and I do want to shift on to like the new journey, and I do want to talk about being on TV, and I want to talk about the impact that you've had on like disordered eating disorders in Scotland. Like I do want to talk about these things, but back when, let's say pre-first heart attack, what did like a day look like for you? Like how did that pan out?
And the depths of eating disorder, is that?
Yeah.
Well, really isolating myself away from family and friends, because that's what eating disorders do to you. Like you're scared of what people will think, but at the same time, as sad as this sounds, the eating disorder becomes like your best friend. Like it controls your whole life. So I isolated myself away from everybody. Like all my friends that I was close to, I ended up kind of losing track with them. Some of them obviously kept in touch with me, which was great. Some of my ones that I've had for childhood, but I would never really kind of keep in touch with them in person. It was basically staying in the house 24/7, like my meals regulated, and I suppose it to kind of drag it back a wee bit as well. Like I was suffering at the time, probably around about the age of 15, with obsessive compulsive disorder, though it was never diagnosed as that, but I know now it definitely was, and it turns out that that's actually a precursor to actually developing an eating disorder, and they've actually found that in people's brains and things through King's College London. I was kind of like basically washing myself like 16 times a day, constantly regulating my meals. So that carried on like, right in through to the eating disorder itself. And like I say, it was basically like regulating my meals, cutting down on my meals, exercising obsessively, like 15 hours a day. I was getting energy, like an adrenaline rush. So people kind of think to yourself, how could it be possible that you were at that really low body weight, but you were able to exercise for like 15 hours a day? I think it was just adrenaline. But
yeah,
I was lucky that my dad was still alive. Like, to put you in the picture as well, that I actually suffered a massive prolapse bowel, and that was basically because I was taking in that little food that everything was basically just going through me kind of thing. So I ended up suffering a massive prolapse bowel and ended up having to get staples in my bowel because of that. So it was basically, it was a sad existence basically. It was staying in the house 24/7, basically just not having the energy to do anything but exercise and lay in bed the rest of the day.
That is, honestly, it's just, honestly, it's crazy to hear, like, they just, like, like, for me to try and, like, think about it and, like, imagine, like, it's just unbelievable. And I have heard before that, like, that adrenaline rush that you're talking about, like, your body is so stressed in that starving state that, like, cortisol's through the roof, adrenaline's through the roof, noradrenaline, so, like, your body is just, like, complete fight or flight. Did you feel, like, did you feel weak and drained, or did you actually feel okay?
I felt absolutely great up until probably just around about the time of the heart attack. That's when I think things really took a turn for the worst, and I think that was mainly because of, obviously, the depletion of minerals. I think that was a big part, but not until that point.
Yeah. That's, honestly, it's surreal, because, again, like I say, like, I've seen a couple from time to time, you'll put up a transformation photo from, like, when you were at, like, your like, would you call it, like, leanest? Like, you had, like, nothing. There was just, like, a little bit of muscle,
just
like,
skin and bones.
And then to now. Yeah. It's hard to think, like you were saying, like, there, like, you're like, oh, I felt like I was, like, flying, like, I was. But again, I guess if that adrenaline and everything's just flying, like, you're just to complete survival, is insane. So then there was this switch. There was this rock bottom. Nothing else. You didn't think anything else could go bad, and you were like, right, now it's time to look after me. What did the voices in your head start to say then? Like, what did they start to push, or where did they try and drive you towards?
Yeah, it was really like a kind of pushback thing. But like I say, I started to learn how to kind of internalise that eating disorder voice and challenge it. That was the kind of big kind of pushback for me. But probably from like 2015 to 2017 were really difficult periods. I was eating well, but obviously suffering a lot of gut issues due to the eating disorder itself. And to kind of put you in the picture, at that point I actually went vegan, which was, a lot of people all say, why did you do that? Is that another eating disorder in itself, going for like eating disorder into veganism? But actually it was totally for ethical reasons, because I was always big on animals. I've actually got 6 dogs, so love my animals. That's always been a big thing. I would be vegan for probably 2016 right through to 2021. So I was like vegan for 5 years, and I would end up taking massively ill. I don't really know the reason why that was. Like, I suffered a thing that was similar to like a mini stroke, so I was paralysed in my right side. My wife actually said to me, you are not able to speak properly, because I was trying to talk to her and I couldn't get my words out. Even though I was taking things like vitamin B12, I was taking choline, I was taking multivitamins, I was taking all the kind of vegan supplements, I was eating a massive amount of food as well. Just didn't seem to agree with me, so I ended up having to come off veganism at that point. And then now 2 years later, I'm fully back to full health and things like that. I've obviously I've done a level 3 personal training course. I became a level 4 nutritionist through Ben Coomber's Academy, and then done my eating disorder therapy course. So I've got all that as well, kind of thing. So that's where I am at the moment, and obviously probably the fittest I've ever been.
Yeah, mate. Honestly, it's nuts. Like I said in the introduction, like, you have had like 10 lives in your one.
Everybody says that.
It's unbelievable. So
it just seems normal to me, because see when you've lived it.
Yeah, I bet it does. And the thing is, you're just so, like, like we've spoke a few times. Like I've asked you questions that I'm a bit like, I don't know if I would ask that in public, but like you've always come back, you've always answered, you've always spoke, you've left my voice. Like honestly, again, it's just curiosity. I hope it doesn't seem like I'm poking. I hope it just does seem like I am interested, man. Maybe just
these things that help people. That's why I do it. That's why you do it. If it helps somebody, at least take something away from it. That's the big thing. Raising awareness, try to give people hope that you can get through these things, but you can always recover. I think that we're seeing to the point now that children as young as 7 years old are getting eating disorders, and people even in their 70s are developing eating disorders. So it's all demographics, it's all body shapes and sizes. Eating disorders are not about the body weight index. Like, it's not about somebody that's really, really thin. It's about the issues that's going on in your head. They're actual mental illnesses with physical symptoms. The body is just part of that physical symptom. It's dealing with that that's going on in your head. Like, for most intensive purposes, the biggest eating disorder out there is actually binge eating disorder and bulimia. People with bulimia, for all intensive purposes, look as if they're healthy, but it's that going on in your head. So it's important to understand that as well.
Yeah. Are numbers going up with eating disorders with us discovering more people, or
especially during the lockdown? Like, I'm a volunteer with the Eating Disorder charity, so I obviously speak about my eating disorder and things, but I also help people online. So Beat have actually got peered support groups, so we've got a dedicated 24/7 phone line that people can phone in on. There's various different groups, so there's the Swan that's dedicated to anorexia. There's the Dolphins group, which is dedicated to bulimia. We've got ones for carers. So myself and obviously a clinical psychotherapist, we join that, and people can contact us in and speak about their eating disorder and get signposted for help. So that's what we do. But during the lockdown, we actually seen a 320% rise in people with eating disorders contacting us. And that was, I think, probably in a big part because the support network had been cut off, because you couldn't get to GP surgeries, you couldn't get to like support groups that obviously had. So obviously we've seen that with people like Nikki Graham, like the Big Brother celebrity, who she obviously passed away with her eating disorder, and she actually said it was because a support network had been cut off. But a big part for her eating disorder was that she loved to exercise, because she found that when she exercised, it gave her a kind of way to fuel herself, which I don't think is healthy in itself, but it is a way of coping for some people. She obviously didn't do that, and then she ended up relapsing with eating disorder and passed away because of it. So we've seen massive rises in eating disorders during the lockdown, and it's kind of eased a bit now, but it's still at a really bad state.
So, again, you're going to have to excuse my ignorance. Do you think it's like, would you say, imagine if it's like a model or like a journey? Would it be like mental illness, well-being, or trauma that would then lead to potentially some sort of would it be like falling like OCD to eating disorders as like coping mechanisms? Could you explain that maybe? Because I'm maybe just being a bit silly here and not fully. What would you think causes is the initial step?
Yeah, some sort of trauma. Like I say, it could be bullying, it could be grief, it could be stress, it could be social media pressure. Obviously, looking at people and thinking that they've got the body that you probably should have, and things like that. So that kind of pressure, that in itself ends up leading to the eating disorder itself. But there's a big genetic component. Like I say, there's the King's College in London. I've done a lot of studies in eating disorder brains and things, and they've found out that there is a genetic link there and that runs through families and things. But we actually find as well that people with autism, that it can be undiagnosed further down the line, and the big part of that is autism and eating disorders seem to run kind of hand in hand as well. So there's that as well, but there's obviously a trigger there that causes it, whatever that may be. So that leads you to the eating disorder, then things can get out of control. But it could be a diet gone wrong, so somebody maybe decides they're going to get a bit fitter, that they think they've maybe got a couple of pounds to lose, or they want to go and do a show and things like that. They go into it for all good intentions, no realising that they've got that genetic component that causes an eating disorder, then it fully blows out of control. So that can be a case as well for it.
Yeah, so mate, it's actually funny that you're saying that. So I've wanted to speak to a bodybuilding coach, the guy that coaches me, about post-show binges. And
Yeah.
I'm curious to see if that is classed as like an eating disorder or if that's just like a physiological defense for your body to get itself back to like homeostasis. And I don't know if you know much or anything about this or if you've even thought about it, because I know a lot of people, and you see it a lot on social media and like influencers saying dieting led to my eating disorder. Do you think there's a potential there that like they're using the wrong term for, and I don't want to be taken away from anybody, and if you are someone that has gone through that, like I don't want it to be like you've done what you've done, you've gone through what you've gone through. I'm just curious on like another potential perspective or an idea. It's not, I don't think people are lying. I'm just, and again, Tommy, you've got the experience here, maybe you have
It
a better
can definitely
idea.
go both ways because, like I say, it can go from a diet leading into that eating disorder, and it's because you get that genetic component. But for some people, obviously, post-show binges and things like that, that's basically just your body's way of trying to get its back to kind of homeostasis and things like that. It can be like disordered eating in a way, but disordered eating is generally not an eating disorder. You can have disordered eating, but you can never probably develop an eating disorder, if you see what I mean. Disordered eating
Yeah.
is different from actually an eating disorder. It can fully blow into that, but they're two different things altogether.
Could you maybe give us like a just like a brief description or like explanation of how they are different, just for people that, because I've read about it, I have read about it, but could you kind of just a brief description about the differences, just so people know?
Well, disordered eating in general, that can be things like orthorexia, like kind of clean eating and things like that. So that's generally not seen as a full blown eating disorder in itself. But an eating disorder is totally different because your whole life's controlled by that. So if you're somebody that feels that you need to control your food intake and you need to control your body in a way, that's probably, I would say, an eating disorder. So if you've got the kind of feelings within you, that is in a way you probably developing an eating disorder. So if you've got the kind of signs, understand that. But that's totally different from a disordered eating. If you see what I'm saying, that can just be like orthorexia, clean eating, deciding you want to be really, really healthy, but cutting out food groups. So it can be like the keto diet and things like that. Even though that's, I suppose, healthy in some ways, but that can all be disordered eating in general.
Yeah, yeah. That's kind of how I thought of it. Like the way, so like again, Tommy, correct me if I'm wrong. Like my perception of like disordered eating is you potentially have like just a mindset around food. Like you need to track calories, you should eat clean, you need to cut carbs.
Yeah,
It's like a mindset. Whereas like eating disorders, there is like this mental well-being side that's potentially a little bit more extreme, and it has like
exactly.
actual unhealthy. And I'm not saying that the other one's not unhealthy, but there's like unhealthy
Yeah,
um, consequences that come along with it.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, yeah. Because I actually like I'm an advocate of tracking calories, but I know that there's a lot of research coming out now saying that like for males tracking calories can lead to disordered and eating disorders, and again it's the reason I started reading more and more about it is purely because I suggest it. Do you find that you are able to potentially track calories? Are you able to? Is there like certain diets or certain things that you've tried that are working for you that you feel are healthy options?
Yeah, well, I track calories personally, but I don't recommend it to people in eating disorders because that, in a way, is just giving control to the eating disorder. Like you've got to kind of take back control for that. Obviously, in some cases with people with eating disorders, they've got to kind of do like maybe like a few weeks of tracking calories, basically, so they can understand that they're getting enough food in. That can be a place, but once they can understand like portion sizes and they're able to like eyeball things and kind of say like this is meals that I maybe like having a few days in a week that they can rotate them and things like that. That's the way they should go because you don't really want to be controlling calories and not controlling your life again. for some people it can be okay. Me personally, it's okay, but it's something I don't recommend that people do in general, because it's just feeding into the eating disorder itself.
Yeah. So here's something that I'm going to say, and I really hope it doesn't make me sound heartless or like... I just hope it doesn't make me sound like a horrible bastard, but I'd like to hear, like... So, there is a big thing now with people, young people of all ages, call in, like, when they feel nervous, they'll say they've got anxiety. When they're a bit worried about something, they've got stress. They're maybe just having a low day, they call it depression. Do you feel like there's similar things within, like, the eating disorder realm? Like, people maybe... something happens, or they maybe feel a certain way, or do you feel like it is more like, well, as soon as that's happened once, that's it?
I would say, yeah, as soon as it's happened once, that's it. I've no really experienced that in general, but it probably does happen, but something I've no personally experienced, so I wouldn't want to say anything about that, really.
Yeah. Again, I hope it doesn't make me sound like a heartless bastard, but like...
No, not at all.
When people are like...
It's something that we need to talk about.
Yeah, because again, like, there's obviously, like, these things are all on spectrums. There's, like, severity and there's like, intensity, like, they're all on, like, spectrum things, and I wonder if there is, I don't know, maybe it's just something else. So Tommy, like, let's talk about, like, what sort of impact do you know that you've now potentially had on, like, eating disorders and, like, the routes for help? And you mentioned that when you were in the ward, is that what I would call it, just the ward in the hospital? They were taking notes and they were trying to find out about you as much as possible. Have you seen big changes in how people are helped now? And what sort of impact do you feel like you've potentially had?
Absolutely. So originally when I spoke about my eating disorder, like I say, it was in 2015 at Eating Disorder Awareness Week at the Scottish Parliament. That was the first time I'd ever spoke publicly. That was in front of hundreds of people, obviously, the First Minister, everything like that. I was pure shaking like a leaf, and for that point, getting contact with me and speaking about my eating disorder in the newspapers, TV, virtually everything, I've had like hundreds, and I would say maybe thousands of people like email me, like saying about like, I've helped them with their eating disorder to go and get that first step, actually getting help. I've had parents come forward and say that they've understood that their child's had an eating disorder and I've helped them and things like that. And for that point, I've actually went on to doing like policy work. So now actually what I do is I do a policy work with the Scottish Government and the Eating Disorder Charity. So I meet every Wednesday night at 6 o'clock with the Scottish Government, basically to help like kind of push forward eating disorder treatment inpatient and in the community setting. So that's been massive for me to actually kind of see that kind of move forward and try to get the help that people have. And because I don't want people to go through the kind of pitfalls that I actually have, because like I say, back in 2014, you weren't hearing about people speaking about eating disorders, especially men, but seeing people like Christopher Eccleston, the actor, Paul Gascoigne, the footballer, Freddie Flintoff, the cricketer, see them come forward and speak about their eating disorder, I think that helped a lot as well, because people think, for all intents and purposes, these kind of folk have got great lives, they've got everything, they've got all this money and things, so for them to speak about it, it probably broke down barriers as well. So I think they were a bigger influence than I've ever been, but I done something, and I think that's really, really important, that I've kind of gave people a voice and that I've kind of pushed eating disorder treatment on in a way. So I'm continuing to do what I'm doing. I'm speaking about it constantly. So yeah, I think I've done no too bad.
I'd agree. I think you've done unbelievable, because you have been in the paper, you've been on TV, and everybody listening will be able to tell you speak really well. Like, you've definitely got that Borders act, like that Southern Scottish accent. That I'll probably have to put some subtitles over. But you speak so well, like you speak brilliantly, like, and I think I think it's been such a fascinating journey, like, to hear about it, to hear the impact it's had on you, and I think that what I love hearing is like how healthy and strong and fit you feel now. Whereas, and I think for people listening, if you are in like a similar position and you're doing that amount of exercise to try and get yourself fitter and stronger, and you're restricted and punishing yourself in ways with food, that like listen to Tommy. Tommy's saying now, fueling himself, having an idea about the amount of calories, like this is him stronger. This is him handling things better. He feels better for doing these things. And mate, if we can help someone, Jesus Christ, we've done a good job today.
Exactly. That's what it's
Tommy,
all
there's a
about.
few things I want to. Yeah, exactly. And anybody that is listening, they know like I probably don't have the answers, but I've got an ear. I've got 2 ears, so I can listen. Tommy, I know for a fact.
Yeah.
If anybody wants to reach out to him, I will have his everything down below. If you feel like you're suffering with anything, or even if you're just you don't feel good, like a lad, female, whatever, like you can message Tommy, you can message me, reach out to professionals. Like I think it's testament. And if you go and have a look at Tommy's Instagram and you see where he was, you've just heard the story, and I fucking can't imagine like much worse happening to many folk, to where he was to now. And I do really want to talk about that. I want to talk about where the journey's going now. But this is just a curiosity question, Tommy, right? So you say that you've got 6 dogs. I went on your Instagram and I scrolled back, right? You've been attacked a couple times by dogs, eh?
Yeah, well, originally, probably about 2-3 years ago, actually what happened was, I've got an Irish Wolfhound, and what actually happened was the dog across the road, it's a Staffordshire Cross Terrier. We found out it had actually been rehomed like 3 times, which was crazy. And then the person actually taking it on, and they've got a 4-year-old child, which I think was mental that they took on a dog like that. I was out walking my dog, and I do canny fit. So canny fit, actually, what that is, it's canicross. So you've got a harness around your waist, your dog's on a bungee line, and basically you go trail running through like woods. So we do like competitions and things like that here in Ayrshire. So I do that. My dog was on its bungee lead and his harness, and the dog come running round the back of the bushes, grabbed my dog by the head and bit through his skull, and all I heard was this crunching noise, and my dog just let out this big squeal, and I thought my dog was literally dead. I bent down, and the next minute that dog that attacked him jumped up, grabbed my arm and started latching onto me, ripped all the tendons in my arm. The owner came running, grabbed its teeth and pulled it off me after about 5-10 minutes. And that's where I ended up. So I spent like the next 6 months trying to learn to use my hand again, because it ripped all the tendons in my arm. And my dog spent like a whole week in the hospital. They thought it literally missed his brain by 1 inch or something like that. So crunched right through his skull. So it was crazy.
And what about the Bull Mastiff?
Yeah, Bull Mastiff cross.
And that was when you got attacked in the park, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So what happened there? So mate, I went back through your Instagram and I seen this, like these marks on your face. What happened there?
Similar type of thing. That I was actually out with my little. I've got a Westie cross. She's a cross between a Jack Russell and a Westie. She was actually in season at the time, which this dog come flying towards me. It basically went to go for her, and the next minute, my wee Westie kind of retaliated and went for that. It jumped up and latched onto my face and bit me in the face. So it was like, I've not had much luck with dogs, but not any of my own anyway, that's for sure.
Holy. Mate, what did you think when the dog bit your face?
Well, what can you think, really? It's like, you're just like, it's, I don't know.
Mate, this was just curiosity. I just seen these on your Instagram and I was like, I need to know what happened here. Okay, so Tommy has now progressed away from his eating disorders. Did you call it? You're still in recovery. You're recovering. So now he has new physical goals.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk us a little bit about that? Yeah.
Yeah. So
okay.
Me personally, I personally say I'm fully recovered, but I always say, like, for most people, I would say you're in recovery. It's just like, if you can consider it like alcohol problems, like, it's quite different with an eating disorder. It's the same thing. Like, alcohol is an addiction, eating disorders are an addiction as well. It's just really the same. But difference with alcohol is, like, you can abstain from the alcohol and go to therapy and be away from that. With an eating disorder, you constantly have to deal with the thing that you're controlling all your life, which is food. So it's different kind of thing. But my goals now is that I'm trying to get in the best shape of my life. So I'm actually in a, what would you call it, recomp cutting phase at the moment. So I'm like 6 weeks into that. and I'm going to be doing a photo shoot at the end of August, and if that goes well, probably going to try and step on stage eventually, which seems crazy, but that's my goal. I'm never going to be the biggest person in the gym, but the one thing I've got is I'm a perfectionist, which I think a lot of people with eating disorders will say. I've got that work ethic which I can drive myself to places, which is probably a curse and a blessing at the same time. So that's one thing I've got. I can really, really push myself, and I think that that's where I can go with like the exercise, and I do that, but I do it in a healthy way. So that's my goals at the moment. I think I can do it, but taking each day as it comes, as the same goes.
I know you're going to be able to do it, man. So what does training look like just now?
Basically, at the moment I'm doing a push pull and legs, so like generally 6 days a week. I've cut it down to 5 at the moment because I'm in that kind of recomp phase. So I'm trying to hit like legs twice a week, and then kind of rotate that each week, and then like twice maybe like I'll hit like back and twice a week, or like vice versa kind of thing. So rotating that really.
Yeah. So Thomas sent me. We spoke about this. I actually missed him at a bodybuilding show maybe a month ago. I think it must have been now. I seen you over. You were over at my left, and I was like, right, I'm going to go see him.
Yeah.
And then the lad that was there at support came on the stage. So by the time I went round to go see you, I think you'd left. So I didn't actually get a chance to catch up or chat with you. But we spoke a bit after that, and seeing how like I'm thinking like I've gone back on your Instagram and I've seen where you were at like the absolute like rock bottom of the eating disorder to the amount of muscle mass that you've gained. It's honestly unbelievable. What has training been like since having like exercise addiction to now? Like what's like the mindset around it, and what has changed, or what are some of the biggest things that have changed?
Yeah, well, my recovery was kind of like, I suppose you would say, unorthodox in the sense that at the time, I'd never really kind of covered that. I was suffering from osteoporosis, which generally happens quite a lot with people with eating disorders. So, and because I had suffered the heart damage to my heart, the GP actually put me into a GP referral program way back at 2015. So I was exercising through that, but it was under like instructions from a personal trainer, even though I was qualified myself. And it was basically just to kind of get me back lifting. So I was doing a kind of a lot of things like floor pressing, pendlay rows, things like that, basically kind of to build up my muscle mass. So I was learning to basically kind of get a good relationship with exercise, and it got to the point like I was able to like exercise and basically no control my food because of it. I was learning to fuel myself properly. So now it's to the point that basically I can go to the gym, or I can leave the gym. I can be a lazy cunt at the best of days if you want me to be, but it's like I think that's where you've got to develop it. It's like you've got to be able to get to that stage where you can love exercise, but it should benefit your life. It shouldn't take away from your life. So if it's getting to the point that exercise is controlling your life, you're missing like social occasions, you're missing family time, or you're not wanting to go out with meals and things like that, that's when exercise is like controlling your life. I can do all that, and I think that's when you know that you're fully recovered, and that's where I am at the moment.
Yeah. Mate, it's class. Honestly, it's so brilliant to hear. So outside of training, like what do you do in your free time? Like you sound like such a busy guy. You got 6 dogs, partner, like everything going on. What else do you do? You got any other hobbies? You got any other interests?
Yeah, well, in my spare time, obviously, I coach people with eating disorders, so I do that online, basically. I've got people, obviously, in Utah, in the US. I've got people in Adelaide in Australia, like all over the place. So I do that on the side, plus coaching people through nutrition and things. So that's part of my programme. I actually work with the Ayrshire Community Trust here in Ayrshire, so I do a programme called Cooking in a Budget. It's helping people that's basically been unemployed for a while, they've got disabilities, helping them to how to control, like, kind of cook a meal like under £5 and things like that, and basically coach them like on general fitness. And I've got a kind of basic programme all around that, so I do that on the side as well. And obviously my volunteer work with See Me Scotland and Beat, my policy work, I've got a lot of volunteering and things like that. going to the gym, spending time with my wife, my canicross that I do, and sometimes in the spare time I like to play the PlayStation 5 and things like that. So that's my life. I've got a lot going on, I would say, but I make it happen at least. So not enough hours in the day sometimes, mind you, which my wife isn't happy about, but that's another story.
Yeah, so like I said, it's Flow_fitness and mental health. I will add that. You need to go have a look at Tommy's stuff. His story's unbelievable. The service that he provides helps other people. It's definitely, if you're someone that does feel that they need support or help or even a bit of guidance, like honestly, Tommy's your man with that. As I mentioned at the start though as well, like what's been spoke about in here, that's not necessarily going to be your approach. As Tommy mentioned, his was a bit unorthodox. He was almost like an anomaly. Like, you'll need the specific help that you need. Tommy, mate, honestly, I reckon I could sit here and talk to you for bloody ever, but I know that you're busy with everything going on. So I finish all my podcasts with the same question. And I don't know if you've listened, I don't know if you've heard it, but what do you think it takes to be a good man? Because in my opinion, you are a great man. So what are some of the traits that are needed to be a good man?
Well, I think mostly it's being able to talk about your struggles and be open about that, but no make struggles your master, if that makes sense. I think a good man should lift people up and to look for something that's bigger than himself, to stand for what he believes in, but to be able to listen to other opinions and have the ability to change those views when new information is presented. To be able to look after his loved ones and look after his friends and want others to succeed. But most importantly, the biggest thing I think is to leave the world in a better place than you originally found it. I think that's what really makes a good man.
Mate, unbelievable. And I think you're definitely on the track and on a path to do that yourself, single-handedly. It's honestly, Tommy, it's been unbelievable talking to you. I thank you so much for your time. I know there's going to be a whole bunch of questions. I know that there'll be opportunity for us to talk more about things, and I would love to check in either a bit closer to the photo shoot or maybe a little bit after if you'd be up for that.
Definitely, yeah. That'd be fantastic, yeah. I really appreciate you having me on. You're somebody that inspires me and I look up to, so I want to say thanks for all that you do, so that's important to say as well.
Oh, mate. I'll cry. I will genuinely start crying. But honestly, mate, it's been an absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure. And thank you. Thank you for that. I'm going to stop this now. We'll get a little chat and then I'll let you off. But thank you, Tommy. Everybody really appreciates it. And everybody's going to absolutely love that episode. So thank you.